Thank you very much, Minister. I now call on Graham Simpson to be followed by David Stewart. Graham Simpson.
Thank you. Buying a new home is the biggest financial commitment that most of us will ever make. Whether it's second-hand or brand new, you want the process to be seamless, and you don't want to find faults later on that you are not aware of. Before I became an MSP, while serving as a councillor, I became aware through a number of cases that people's rights when buying new homes are not what they should be, and that the system of checking buildings' standard and quality was and is patchwork and sometimes, frankly, shoddy. I was called in to assist with people living on an estate where maybe up to half the properties had had problems with their foundations. Some had managed to get help from the builders if they claimed before the initial short guarantee ran out. Others were at the mercy of the warranty providers who then took over, and many were not happy with the service they got. When I got involved, the legal position was that the original builders, a major national firm, did not have to do anything, and the warranty providers, basically an insurance company, made their own call on whether to pay out on claims. I managed to get the builders around the table and do the right thing. They agreed to fix the problems and offered a bespoke further guarantee on repaired foundations, the first time it had been done in the UK. Only one house on the estate has work outstanding. But this came about despite the law, despite the system. I had a similar situation with blocks of flats where the roofs had failed and again managed to get the builders to act when they didn't have to. These experiences showed me two things. One, people buying new homes should have greater redress when things go wrong. And two, houses should never be built with such major faults. The checking system should be more thorough. When I became an MSP and a member of the Local Government and Communities Committee, I suggested this was an area we could explore. It's fair to say that fellow committee members were sceptical, but we'll run round to the importance of the issue as soon as we started to take evidence. And the evidence we heard from members of the public who'd suffered under the system was particularly powerful. As we conducted our inquiry, the report into the Edinburgh Schools fiasco was published. And this raised the same issues around building regulations and lack of scrutiny. Then Grenfell happened and our inquiry expanded into fire safety. So what are the two issues I mentioned earlier? First, the rights of new home buyers. Consumer goods legislation gives consumers a range of remedies: refund, repair and replacement if goods are faulty. New home buyers do not automatically have these rights. Any guarantees are not underwritten by law and are a voluntary act by developers offered to house buyers. And that's the way that the developers like it. There's a voluntary code of practice. The key word is voluntary. Consumer law is reserved, so that's not something we looked at as a committee. So I'll be raising the matter directly with Sajid Javid to explore UK-wide solutions. There are, though, things we could do in Scotland. I asked the Law Society if standardised missives would help, and they agreed it would. We'd need a change in the law, though, to bring that about. Developers may resist, but it would remove much of the uncertainty that presently arises from the bespoke nature of each builder's sales contract, which deters many from pursuing claims. The contract could set out how defects are handled, and money could be withheld for potential repairs. And there could be provision for dealing with disputes before referral to an ombudsman. And access to an ombudsman, which I think would have to be a new role, would be another layer of protection. Secondly, what about the system that allows buildings with major faults to be constructed, be they public or private? Currently, building control officers risk assess sites to decide how often to inspect them. They don't inspect every stage of every house, hiding behind a woolly phrase, reasonable inquiry. Now, if you bought a new home, you might think it reasonable to assume it had been rigorously checked before a completion certificate has been issued. Not so. Reasonable inquiries can mean very little. A house buyer can have no confidence that their home has been checked for build quality at every stage because it probably hasn't. There's currently no way of guaranteeing that buildings are fit for purpose. A completion certificate is not a guarantee that the building has been constructed properly, merely that it has been constructed. They're not worth the paper they're written on. It's absolutely essential that those issuing completion certificates carry out mandatory checks at key stages of building. This was also highlighted by the Cole report. So who should verify that work that has been done properly? We took mixed evidence on this, but in the end, we were not convinced that work should go to the private sector. On balance, we felt that councils should continue to do the work as they are impartial. However, Kevin Stewart renewed licences for all councils, but only gave poorly performing Glasgow, Edinburgh and Stirling councils 1 year. It's my view that if they've not upped their game by the end of that, then private firms should be considered. The committee heard strong evidence that clerks of works would help drive up quality, and Kevin Stewart told the committee, quotes, "In my opinion, having an experienced clerk of works might involve spending, but will save a lot in the future." And I agree with that. Presiding officer, I'm almost finished. Somebody want to give? Okay, if I get...
Convener Bob Doris.
Thank Mr Simpson for giving way. It was in relation to the idea of the private sector coming into Glasgow, Edinburgh, Stirling after a year. That, of course, deviates from our committee recommendation that we're looking at today. I'm just wondering if you give consideration for other local authorities who could come into those 3 local authorities to drive up standards. It doesn't have to be a private sector solution. It could be another local authority within the public sector could perform that role also.
Graham Simpson.
Yeah, of course. I'm giving my view, and my view is that private firms should be considered, but I would also say other councils should be considered. So, presiding officer, we should aim for a system where buildings are built to an acceptable standard, that someone is responsible for ensuring that happens, and that buyers, be they individuals or whoever, have recourse if things go wrong. The proposals to have standardised missives, an ombudsman, mandatory inspections at key stages and clerks of works would go a long way to redress the balance, as would better consumer protection. And I commend these proposals to the Parliament.